Richard Blundell, catedràtic d'Economia Política de la University College London, va impartir la lliçó inaugural de la Facultat de Ciències Econòmiques de la UPF del curs 2023-2024. La taula va ser presidida per Elena Ramalhinho, vicerrectora d'Internacionalització de la UPF, pel degà de la Facultat, Walter García Fontes, i pel professor Albrecht Glitz.
We look forward to your talk. Thank you.
Richard Blundell actualment ocupa la càtedra David Ricardo d'Economia Política a la Universitat College London, on va ser nomenat professor d'Economia el 1984. La lliçó d'aquest any es titulava Inequality, Redistribution and the Labour Market, Reflections from the Deaton Review of Inequality. Richard Blundell va compartir les seves reflexions durant la conferència centrada en el panel The IFS Deaton Review, Inequalities in the 21st Century.
And what we want to do here is think about which inequalities matter most and why is that the case. Not all inequalities are bad, of course. There's plenty of inequalities that one might not worry about. But there are many inequalities that people do worry about, and often they're very different kinds of inequality. And I want to think about or the review on how they're related. You can think of inequality in income, of course, but you can also think of inequality between groups, between different gender, between different races or ethnic groups, or indeed between workers and owners of firms. So there's a set of inequalities that are much broader than the usual, and in fact, the remit of this is to move beyond the Gini, although I'm going to start with the Gini. For those of you who don't know the Gini, it's a very simple, single and popular measurement of inequality.
Aquest projecte de 5 anys, liderat per Angus Deaton de la Universitat de Princeton, va abastar 17 països d'Europa i dels Estats Units, amb la participació d'un grup d'investigadors interdisciplinars dedicat a recopilar la millor evidència disponible de les ciències socials. L'objectiu principal era abordar preguntes importants sobre la desigualtat, com ara quines desigualtats són més rellevants i com es relacionen els diferents tipus de desigualtat, així com quina combinació de polítiques seria l'adequada per abordar els impactes adversos.
It's hard to think of studying inequality without having a philosopher, a sociologist, and others' expert advice. And in fact, here's a little pictures of the panel to get you a feel for how it's working. I won't go through everyone here. Some of you, especially at the front here, will recognize some of them. Angus Deaton is the chair, and we chose him because he's a very independent and brilliant thinker. And you might think, and he certainly thought this when we invited him, why would you invite me, a person who's famous for looking at regulation and industrial organization? Why would he be on a panel about inequality? And the reason is very simple, that many of the inequalities that we see in the labor market and across consumers and other things is to do with what's happening to the world of companies, thriving companies, network companies, and the problem of market power and the importance you all know of the big tech companies in driving inequalities as well as many other good things. So how do we think about regulating those companies in the light of their impact on inequality?
Blundell va posar de manifest que l'ocupació per si sola no és suficient per escapar de la pobresa i els baixos ingressos. Malgrat les millores observades en l'ocupació femenina, l'augment del salari mínim, els nivells educatius i la participació de les dones en l'educació superior i en la força de treball remunerada.
And the dip in employment that used to happen around the time of children is still there, but it's more flattening and it's much higher. So that's a kind of positive news as well, especially when you're thinking of gender differences. Men have fallen back, and particularly, of course, in Spain, we know employment rates among young people are still high. There's a variety of differences across Europe, but just to pick on on Spain as an example. So this is all in this country study, just simple data analysis. But there are many kind of interesting and positive trends. And I guess if you like minimum wage, and generally it's been a kind of positive experience, the minimum wage has risen quite systematically over time in many economies. If I go back to before 1999, the UK and Germany didn't have a minimum wage. It was introduced in 1999 in the UK. And you can see that the UK, which is in orange there, has had variation. But right now, it's one of the highest minimum wages in Europe, up there with France and Germany, up there with France and Belgium, which have always had systematically high minimum wages. So you might think that's good. We know that it had relatively little impact on employment.
Blundell també va abordar alguns dels aspectes claus que poden contribuir a la reducció d'aquestes desigualtats.
So there are kind of three aspects to this. One is the role of education. So if you get educated, do you do better over your lifetime? Yes. But if you're educated and you go into a part-time job or certain occupations, you don't do that much better. And it's women who do that. But what about the role of human capital investments through your career? Can you make up for losses early on with human capital? It's very hard. In fact, most human capital investments are higher in your career when you've had higher investments when you were younger. So those who come out of school with little qualification get hardly any training at work. It's hard to measure private training, by the way, at work, but you can do it. And then there's the role of skills. Increasingly, this is a kind of hot topic in economics and economic research, and that's the match between the worker and the firm. And why has this become so important? It's become so important because, one, workers may not have the right skills to match the firms that are around, but more importantly, if in your particular geographic area there aren't any firms that have the ability to match with kind of good skills, then there's very little opportunity. And geographic mobility is, if anything, slowed down. But getting mobility by geographic mobility is a very hard thing to do, and I'll show you that. And what happens is, it's fantastic, the development here, because every country has amazing data now, administrative data, following workers and firms, and we can kind of really dig into this, and that's what I've spent a lot of my time on.
Va destacar la importància d'una progressió salarial al llarg de la vida laboral, una qüestió estretament vinculada al paper de l'educació, les inversions en capital humà en l'àmbit laboral i el desenvolupament de les habilitats tant individuals com empresarials.
And my view is that after COVID, this hasn't gone away. Progression is really key because so many people have had low human capital inputs as they're coming on to the labour market. Just to give you a few pictures, this is the 3 education groups. There are pictures like this for every country in the review, but this is UK women. It's a bit bumpy because this is a smaller survey, but I'm going to show you the same everywhere. And they're the 3 education groups. So at the top, they're the average log wages, so no econometrics here. Econometrics does matter. There is selection and issues like that. But if you're if you're coming out from higher education, you start a bit higher, but you haven't been working while you're at education typically. But then you get massive progression, massive jump up. Whereas at the bottom, you get a small jump. You're learning a little bit at the beginning, but then it's very flat. And if I give you the pictures for Spain, look very, very similar, actually.
Al final també va haver-hi temps per algunes preguntes. Així, es va donar per inaugurat el curs acadèmic.
Inaugurem, doncs, el curs 2023-2024 la Facultat d'Economia i Empresa. Moltes gràcies.